The letter arrived at the fort 3 days after Lenora Reynolds buried her mother in St. Louis, and it contained words that would change her life forever in ways she could never have imagined. Lenora stood on the dusty platform at Fort Bridger, Wyoming Territory, clutching that same wrinkled envelope in her trembling hands as the stagecoach that brought her disappeared into a cloud of desert sand. The September sun of 1876 beat down mercilessly on her black mourning dress, and sweat trickled down her spine as she surveyed the rough frontier town that was supposed to be her salvation. Adobe buildings lined the main street, their walls cracked and weathered by endless seasons of wind and sun. Cowboys moved through the street with purposeful strides, their spurs jingling against the wooden boardwalks. Women in faded calico dresses hurried between the general store and the millinery, shielding their faces from the dust with worn shawls. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, a small carpet bag containing 2 spare dresses and her mother's Bible, and the letter that promised her a position as a schoolteacher in this wild outpost of civilization. The letter had been her mother's final gift, secured through a childhood friend who had moved west years ago. Lenora had no other options. The debts her mother left behind had consumed everything, even the modest boarding house they had run together for the past 5 years. A tall man approached her from across the street, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. He wore typical cowboy attire, faded denim pants, a chambray shirt rolled to his elbows revealing tanned forearms, and a weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. A red bandana hung loosely around his neck, and a leather vest completed the outfit. As he drew closer, Lenora could make out his features more clearly. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bleached brown hair that curled slightly at his collar, a strong jawline shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of Wyoming sky. "Miss Reynolds." His voice carried a gentle drawl that softened the harsh consonants. "Yes." Her throat felt dry as desert sand. "I am looking for Mrs. Patterson. She wrote to my mother about the teaching position." The cowboy's expression shifted, and something uncomfortable flickered across his face. He removed his hat, revealing more of that sun-streaked hair, and held it against his chest in a gesture of respect. "I am Ethan Anderson. I work the Anderson Ranch just outside town. I am afraid I have some difficult news, Miss Reynolds. Mrs. Patterson passed away 2 weeks ago." Fever took her quick. The world seemed to tilt beneath Lenora's feet. The letter felt suddenly heavy in her hand, as worthless as Confederate currency. "But she wrote to my mother. She promised there would be work for me here. I have traveled for 2 weeks to reach this place." "I know, and I am sorry." Ethan's blue eyes held genuine sympathy. "The whole town knew Martha was trying to find a teacher before she took sick. We need a school something fierce. Got near 30 children running wild with no proper education. But the town council has not had time to sort out the details since Martha's passing. There is no salary arranged, no boarding secured." Lenora felt her composure cracking like dried mud. She had spent the last of her money on the stagecoach fare. She had no return ticket, no funds to secure lodging, nothing but the promise in a letter from a woman now dead. "I see. Then I suppose I have made this journey for nothing. Now hold on." Ethan stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage. "I did not say there was no solution. Just that it will take some sorting. Are you hungry? The boarding house serves a decent meal, and we can figure something out while you eat." Pride warred with desperation in Lenora's chest. She had not eaten since yesterday's stale biscuits at a way station, and her stomach felt hollow. But accepting charity from a stranger went against everything her mother had taught her about maintaining dignity and independence. Yet what choice did she have? "I cannot pay for a meal," she admitted, the words tasting bitter. "Did I ask you to?" Ethan's tone held no judgment, only practical kindness. "Come on. You look about ready to fall over, and we cannot have our new teacher fainting in the street before she even starts work. But you just said there is no position arranged." "There is not, but there will be." He said it with such certainty that Lenora found herself believing him. "This town needs you, Miss Reynolds. We just have to convince the council to move faster than they usually do. That is all." She followed him down the main street, past the saloon where piano music drifted through the batwing doors, past the blacksmith shop where hammer rang against anvil, past the marshal's office where a weathered man sat tilted back in a chair watching the street with tired eyes. The boarding house stood at the far end of town, a two-story structure that looked slightly more substantial than its neighbors, with actual glass windows and a painted sign that read Sutton House in fading letters. The proprietress, a sturdy woman named Mrs. Sutton with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, looked Lenora up and down with shrewd eyes. "This the teacher Martha sent for." "It is," Ethan confirmed. "She needs a room and a meal while we sort out the particulars with the council. Council is not meeting until next week. Old Henderson called for a special session about water rights with the ranchers. Then we will talk to them individually." Ethan's voice carried a note of determination. "Meanwhile, Miss Reynolds needs a place to stay." Mrs. Sutton's expression softened slightly as she took in Lenora's exhausted face and mourning dress. "Lost someone recently, my mother, 3 weeks ago, and came all this way alone on Martha's promise." It was not a question. Mrs. Sutton nodded as if making a decision. "You can stay in the small room at the end of the hall upstairs. But I run a business, not a charity. If the council does not approve the position and salary within 2 weeks, you will need to find another arrangement." "That is more than fair. Thank you." Lenora felt tears prickling behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. The meal was simple but filling. Roasted chicken, boiled potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread with butter. Lenora tried to eat slowly, to maintain proper manners, but hunger made her forget refinement. Ethan sat across from her with his own plate, eating with the efficient movements of a man accustomed to quick meals between long hours of work. "Tell me about yourself," he said between bites. "What made you want to teach out here in the territories?" One had little to do with it. The honesty surprised her, but something about Ethan's straightforward manner invited truth. "My mother and I ran a boarding house in St. Louis. When she fell ill, I had to hire help I could not afford while I cared for her. The doctor's bills mounted. After she passed, the debts consumed everything. Her friend Martha offered this position, and it seemed like providence. A chance to start fresh where no one knew me as the poor girl who lost everything. And now you find yourself in an even more uncertain position than before." Ethan set down his fork and regarded her with those clear blue eyes. "That takes courage, Miss Reynolds, coming all this way on faith alone, or foolishness. Sometimes those are the same thing." A slight smile tugged at his lips. "My father always said the brave and the foolish make the same decisions, just for different reasons." "Is your father here in Fort Bridger?" The smile faded. "He passed 5 years back. Pneumonia. Left me the ranch and a whole lot of responsibilities I was not quite ready for. I was 20 then, thought I knew everything. Learned real quick how much I still had to figure out." "So you understand something of loss." Lenora felt an unexpected connection forming between them, fragile as new silk but present nonetheless. "I do. And I understand starting over when circumstances force your hand." Ethan pushed his empty plate aside and leaned forward slightly. "Here is what I am thinking. My ranch is doing well enough. We run cattle mostly, some horses. I have 3 men working for me full-time and pick up day laborers when we need extra hands. The house is larger than I need, built by my father with plans for a big family that never materialized. There is a room you could use until the council makes their decision. That way you are not spending your non-existent money on boarding here." Lenora felt her cheeks flush. "I could not possibly accept such an offer. It would be highly improper, a single woman staying at a bachelor's ranch." "I thought you might say that." Ethan did not seem offended. "Mrs. Henley, my housekeeper, lives in the small cottage behind the main house. She is a respectable widow, been with our family since I was a boy. Her presence would serve as chaperone enough to keep the gossips quiet. And before you refuse again, let me be clear. This is not charity. You would earn your keep by helping Mrs. Henley with the cooking and such. She is getting on in years and could use the assistance." It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous from a stranger. But Lenora found herself wanting to trust this cowboy with his honest eyes and straightforward manner. Besides, what alternative did she have? She could not afford Mrs. Sutton's boarding house beyond the 2-week grace period, and if the council delayed their decision longer than that, she would be destitute in a strange town with no way to return east. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me at all." Ethan was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his answer carefully. "My mother died when I was 12. Cholera. My father did his best, but he was lost without her. The women of this town rallied around us, brought meals, helped with the housekeeping, made sure I did not grow up completely wild. I learned then that communities survive by taking care of their own. You came here in good faith to serve this town's children. The least we can do is make sure you have a roof over your head while we sort out the details." His words resonated with a simple decency that Lenora had rarely encountered in the competitive, often cutthroat world of St. Louis boarding houses. Perhaps the frontier brought out different qualities in people. Or perhaps she had simply been fortunate enough to meet one of the good ones. "I accept your offer, Mr. Anderson, and I will work hard to earn my keep. Just Ethan, please. We are not much for formality out here." He stood and retrieved his hat from the chair beside him. "Finish your meal and I will bring the wagon around. We can collect your bag and head out to the ranch before sunset. You look like you could use a good night's rest in a real bed." The ride to the Anderson Ranch took nearly an hour along a rutted dirt road that wound through sagebrush plains and past rocky outcroppings that glowed golden in the late afternoon sun. Ethan handled the horses with easy competence. His weathered hands relaxed on the reins as he pointed out landmarks and offered bits of information about the territory. The Uinta Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat that had only recently given way to autumn's gentler warmth. "That ridge there marks the northern boundary of my land," Ethan said, gesturing toward a line of red rock formations. "We run the cattle in the valley beyond. Good grazing, access to the creek that feeds off the Green River. My father chose this spot for the water rights mostly. Out here, water means everything." "Is that what the council meeting is about? The water rights Mrs. Sutton mentioned?" "Partly. Some of the newer ranchers want to divert more of the creek for irrigation. Those of us who have been here longer worry it will dry up the downstream flow. Gets contentious sometimes." He glanced at her with a slight grin. "Welcome to frontier politics. Makes city government look downright civilized." The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, and Lenora felt her breath catch slightly. It was larger than she expected, a solid 2-story structure built from local timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Outbuildings dotted the property. A large barn, a stable, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and a small cottage that must be Mrs. Henley's residence. Corrals enclosed strong fencing held horses and a few cattle, and chickens scratched in the yard near what looked like a vegetable garden. "It is beautiful," Lenora said, and meant it. There was something honest and enduring about the ranch, a sense of permanence that contradicted the wild emptiness of the surrounding landscape. "My father built it to last." Pride colored Ethan's voice. "Said he wanted to create something that would outlive him, that would stand as proof he had been here and made something of value. I try to honor that by keeping it up proper." A woman emerged from the cottage as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair and a comfortable roundness that spoke of good cooking and satisfied appetite. Her face crinkled into a warm smile as Ethan helped Lenora down from the wagon. "Mrs. Henley, this is Miss Lenora Reynolds, the teacher Martha Patterson sent for." "Miss Reynolds, this is Mrs. Henley, the best cook in Wyoming Territory and the woman who kept me from turning into a complete heathen after my mother passed." "Oh, go on with you." Mrs. Henley swatted at Ethan playfully, but turned welcoming eyes to Lenora. "Martha wrote about you before she took sick. Said you were trained proper in teaching methods and had experience running a household. We have been hoping you would arrive, though I am sorry about Martha. She was a good woman. Thank you. I am sorry to have missed meeting her. Come inside, dear. You look exhausted. Ethan told me your situation when he came by earlier. Do not you worry about a thing. We will get you settled, and tomorrow will sort itself out as it always does." Mrs. Henley's matter-of-fact kindness reminded Lenora painfully of her mother, and she felt her carefully maintained composure finally beginning to crack. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined. Handmade furniture filled the rooms, each piece crafted with obvious care and skill. Woven rugs covered the wooden floors, and curtains framed the windows. Books lined shelves in what appeared to be a study, and a large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main living area. It was a home, not just a house, and Lenora felt an unexpected pang of longing for the stability and safety these walls represented. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right," Ethan said, carrying her small carpet bag as if it weighed nothing. "It was going to be my sister's room, but she died with my mother. Never could bring myself to use it for storage or such. Seemed disrespectful somehow. But I think it would please my mother to know it is finally being used for its intended purpose, to house someone who needs it." The room was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the valley toward those distant mountains. Lenora set her bag on the bed and turned to face Ethan, who stood in the doorway giving her space. "I do not know how to thank you properly for this kindness." "No thanks needed. Just help Mrs. Henley with the cooking and such like we discussed, and we will call it even." He hesitated, then added, "I know this is not what you expected when you made this journey, but I hope you will find Fort Bridger to be a good place despite the rough start. We may not have the refinements of St. Louis, but we have good people here who look after each other." After Ethan left, Lenora sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. The tears came hot and fast, releasing weeks of accumulated grief and fear and exhaustion. She cried for her mother, for the life she had lost, for the uncertainty of her future. But beneath the sorrow ran a thin thread of something else, something that felt almost like hope. She had arrived with nothing but a letter, and found, instead of the promised position, something potentially more valuable. Genuine human kindness from a cowboy who seemed to embody the best qualities of this harsh frontier. The first week at the Anderson Ranch established a routine that brought Lenora a measure of peace she had not known in months. She woke with the sun, helped Mrs. Henley prepare breakfast for Ethan and the ranch hands, and spent her mornings assisting with household tasks. In the afternoons, while Mrs. Henley rested, Lenora would sit on the porch with her mother's books and prepare lesson plans for the school she hoped to soon teach. Evenings brought supper and quiet conversation, the three of them sitting in the main room while Ethan whittled or mended tack and Mrs. Henley knitted. Ethan proved to be an easy person to live around. He worked long days managing the ranch, often leaving before sunrise and returning dusty and exhausted as the light faded. But he always had a kind word and a genuine interest in how Lenora spent her day. He asked about her lesson plans, offered observations about the local children and their various needs, and gradually began to share more about his own life and the challenges of running a ranch in the territories. "Lost 15 head last spring to rustlers," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Marshall could not track them far. They disappeared into the rough country to the south. "It is part of doing business out here, but it still stings. Those cattle represented months of work and investment. Is there no law to protect ranchers? There is law, just not enough of it stretched across too much territory. Marshall Graves does his best, but he is one man covering hundreds of square miles. Most of us rely on helping each other, keeping watch, spreading word when something seems off." He glanced at her with a slight smile. "It is not all hardship, though. There is a freedom here you do not find in the cities, room to breathe and build and become whoever you want to be. Is that what drew your father west? The freedom? That and the land. He grew up poor in Pennsylvania, working in factories that destroyed men's bodies and spirits. He wanted something different, wanted to work under open sky and answer to no one but himself and God. My mother followed him even though it terrified her, leaving everything familiar for this wild unknown. But she told me once that she never regretted it, that watching my father become the man he was meant to be was worth every hardship." Lenora found herself watching Ethan as he spoke, noticing the way the fading light brought out the gold in his hair, the strong lines of his profile, the capable hands that could gentle a horse or mend a fence with equal skill. He was nothing like the refined gentlemen she had occasionally encountered in St. Louis, with their soft hands and softer lives. Ethan was forged by this land, shaped by hard work and honest living, and she was beginning to find that incredibly appealing. The second week brought news from town. Ethan returned from Fort Bridger one afternoon with a serious expression. He found Lenora in the garden helping Mrs. Henley harvest the last of the summer vegetables. "The council wants to meet with you tomorrow," he announced without preamble. "They are finally ready to discuss the teaching position." Lenora's heart jumped. What should I expect? Honestly, they will probably be formal and ask you questions to establish your qualifications, but everyone knows we need a teacher desperately. Unless you admit to being a wanted criminal or something equally disqualifying, they will likely approve the position. Mrs. Henley laughed. "You could do with a bit more reassurance in your delivery, Ethan. What he means, dear, is that you are exactly what this town needs, and the council would be fools to pass you by." The next morning, Lenora dressed in her best dress, a deep blue calico that had been her mother's and which she had altered to fit herself. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up in a style that she hoped projected competence and maturity. At 22, she was young for a teacher, but her years helping her mother run the boarding house had given her a certain confidence in managing people and situations. Ethan drove her into town in the wagon, looking surprisingly formal himself in a clean shirt and vest. Nervous, he asked as they approached Fort Bridger. Terrified, she admitted. What if they reject me? I have nowhere else to go. Then we figure out the next step. But I truly believe it will work out. He reached over and briefly squeezed her hand where it rested on her lap. The gesture was quick and likely meant only as reassurance, but it sent warmth flooding through Lenora's entire body. She was acutely aware of the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers, the unexpected gentleness of his touch. The town council met in a room above the general store. 5 men comprised the council. Mr. Henderson, a wealthy rancher and the council chairman, Mr. Sutton, who owned the boarding house with his wife, Reverend Matthews, who led the small church, Dr. Porter, the town's only physician, and Mr. Chen, who ran the local mercantile. They sat behind a long table and regarded Lenora with varying expressions ranging from skeptical to hopeful. Ethan accompanied her inside, but stood respectfully near the door while she took the single chair positioned in front of the council table. The room felt stuffy despite the open window, and she could hear the sounds of the street below. Horses, wagon wheels, voices calling greetings. Mr. Henderson spoke first. Miss Reynolds, we appreciate you traveling all this way on Martha Patterson's invitation. Her death was a shock to us all and left us in a difficult position regarding the school. We need to establish your qualifications before we can make any decisions. Where did you receive your training? Lenora kept her voice steady and clear. I attended Miss Porter's Academy for Young Ladies in St. Louis, where I received instruction in mathematics, literature, history, geography, and moral philosophy. After completing my own education, I assisted at the academy for 2 years, teaching younger students reading and arithmetic. When my mother fell ill, I left the academy to care for her and help run our boarding house. Can you provide references? Dr. Porter asked, peering at her over small spectacles. I have a letter of reference from Miss Porter herself, though it is 3 years old now. She speaks to my character and teaching ability. Lenora retrieved the carefully folded letter from her reticule and passed it forward. The council members examined it in turn, murmuring among themselves. Reverend Matthews leaned forward with a kind expression. What is your approach to discipline, Miss Reynolds? Frontier children can be quite spirited. I believe in firm but fair treatment, Lenora responded. Clear expectations, consistent consequences, but also recognition of good behavior and effort. Children respond to respect and structure. They want to know their boundaries and to feel that their teacher cares about their success. We have children ranging from age 5 to 15, Mr. Chen noted. Some have had no formal schooling at all. Others are quite advanced. How would you manage such a range? Multi-age classrooms require organization, but are certainly manageable. I would assess each child's level and create individual learning plans while also incorporating group lessons on topics suitable for mixed ages. History, geography, and moral lessons can engage everyone, while mathematics and reading can be tailored to individual ability. The questions continued for nearly an hour. They asked about her religious beliefs, her views on corporal punishment, her willingness to teach practical skills alongside academic subjects, her ability to maintain order and command respect. Lenora answered each question with growing confidence, drawing on her training and experience and also her genuine passion for education. Teaching had always felt like a calling to her, a way to shape young minds and perhaps give children opportunities she herself had sometimes lacked. Finally, Mr. Henderson called for a brief recess while the council deliberated. Ethan met Lenora outside the room, offering her water from a canteen he had brought. You did wonderfully, he said quietly. I could see them warming to you as you spoke. I hope you are right. I want this so badly, not just because I need the position, but because I truly believe I could do good work here." When they were called back in, all 5 council members wore expressions of satisfaction. Mr. Henderson stood to deliver their decision. "Miss Reynolds, the council has voted unanimously to offer you the position of schoolteacher for Fort Bridger. The salary will be $25 per month, paid from a combination of town funds and tuition from families who can afford to contribute. We will provide the schoolhouse, which needs some repair work but should be ready within 2 weeks. As for lodging, we had arranged for you to stay with Martha Patterson, but obviously that is no longer possible. Mr. Sutton has offered a reduced rate at the boarding house." "Actually," Ethan spoke up from his position near the door, "Miss Reynolds has suitable lodging at my ranch. Mrs. Henley serves as chaperone, and the arrangement has been working well." Mr. Henderson's eyebrows rose. "That is quite generous of you, Ethan. But it is rather far from town for daily travel, especially once winter sets in. I will drive her in each morning and collect her each afternoon. My work brings me to town frequently anyway." The council members exchanged glances. Mr. Sutton looked slightly disappointed at losing a long-term boarder, but the others seemed to find the arrangement acceptable. Reverend Matthews nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Henley is a respectable woman. If she finds the arrangement proper, I see no reason to object." "Then it is settled," Mr. Henderson concluded. "Miss Reynolds, welcome to Fort Bridger. School will commence in 2 weeks on Monday, October 2nd. We will announce the opening throughout the area and expect you will have somewhere between 25 and 30 students initially. The schoolhouse is on the east end of town near the church. Ethan can show you. Do you have any questions?" "Just one. What hours do you expect me to keep?" "We thought 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon with an hour for the midday meal. Does that suit you?" "Perfectly." "Thank you, gentlemen. I will do my utmost to serve this community well." As they left the building, Lenora felt as though she were floating. She had secured the position. She had employment and a way forward and a purpose. The relief was so overwhelming that she stumbled slightly on the stairs, and Ethan caught her elbow to steady her. "Easy there, Miss Schoolteacher. Cannot have you breaking an ankle before you even start work." She laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised them both. "I can hardly believe it. 2 weeks ago I had nothing. Now I have a position and a home and a future." "You always had those things," Ethan said softly. "You just needed the right place to build them. Come on, let me show you the schoolhouse." The building was small and simple. A single room with a pot-bellied stove in one corner, rows of rough benches for students, and a desk at the front for the teacher. The walls needed whitewashing. Several windows had cracked panes, and the roof showed signs of water damage. But Lenora walked through the space and saw only possibility. "I will get some of the boys from the ranch to help with repairs," Ethan offered. "New window glass, fresh whitewash, maybe build some proper desks instead of these old benches. We can have it looking proper in no time." "You have already done so much. I could not ask you to do more." "You did not ask, I offered. There is a difference." He stood in the doorway, his tall frame backlit by the afternoon sun. "Besides, I have a vested interest in this school succeeding. My ranch will need educated people to run it someday. Got to start training the next generation early." Over the following 2 weeks, the schoolhouse underwent a transformation. Ethan proved true to his word, bringing his ranch hands to make repairs. They replaced the broken windows, patched the roof, whitewashed the walls until they gleamed, and built proper desks with attached benches. Someone donated a large slate for the front wall, and Mrs. Henley contributed curtains for the windows. The town rallied around the project with an enthusiasm that touched Lenora deeply. Women brought supplies: chalk, slates for students who could not afford their own, precious books to start a lending library, even a bell to ring at the start and end of the school day. Lenora threw herself into preparations with equal vigor. She created a curriculum that would serve multiple age levels, prepared opening day activities, and visited families in town to introduce herself and understand each child's situation. Some families were prosperous, running successful businesses or ranches. Others scraped by on small homesteads or worked as laborers for wages. She promised each family the same thing: she would teach every child according to their ability and need, regardless of their circumstances. Through it all, Ethan remained a steady presence. He drove her to town each day to work on the school, stayed to help with heavy tasks, and drove her back to the ranch each evening. Their conversations during these trips ranged across every topic imaginable. He told her about ranch life, the changing seasons, the delicate balance between man and nature that governed survival in the territories. She told him about St. Louis, the boarding house, her mother's strength and eventual decline, the pain of watching someone you love fade away despite every effort to save them. "You loved her very much," Ethan observed one evening as they drove home under a sky blazing with stars. "She was everything to me. My father died when I was a baby. I never knew him. So it was always just the two of us, working together to keep the boarding house running. She taught me everything: how to cook, how to manage accounts, how to deal with difficult people with grace, how to be strong even when you feel like breaking." Lenora's voice caught slightly. "I thought we would have more time." "We always think that. My father died suddenly. One day he was strong and healthy, the next he was burning with fever. 3 days later he was gone. I kept thinking I should have told him more often how much I appreciated him, how much I learned from watching him work." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "But I think they know. Parents know when they are loved." "I hope so." He glanced at her in the darkness. "Your mother would be proud of you, Lenora. Coming all this way, starting over, making something of yourself despite everything working against you, that takes real courage." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a pleasant shiver through her. "You called me Lenora." "I did." "Is that all right? We are well past formality at this point, seems to me." "It is more than all right, and I should call you Ethan, not Mr. Anderson." "I think you have been calling me Ethan for a while now." "I suppose I have." She smiled in the darkness. The night before school opened, Lenora was too nervous to sleep. She lay in her bed watching moonlight stream through the window and listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into nighttime quiet. Cattle lowed in the distance. An owl hooted from somewhere near the barn. The wind whispered through the sage, carrying the scent of cooling earth and distant pine. A soft knock at her door startled her. "Lenora, are you awake?" She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and cracked the door open to find Ethan standing in the hallway holding a lantern. He still wore his work clothes, suggesting he had been up late dealing with some ranch matter. "Is something wrong?" "No, I just saw your light was still on and figured you might be too nervous to sleep. I thought maybe some warm milk might help. Mrs. Henley swears by it." He held up a cup, steam rising from its surface. Touched by the gesture, Lenora accepted the cup and stepped back to let him in. He set the lantern on the dresser and leaned against the doorframe, maintaining a respectful distance. "You are going to be wonderful tomorrow. Those children are lucky to have you. What if I disappoint them? What if I am not prepared enough? Then you will figure it out as you go, same as everyone does. Teaching is not just about knowing the material, it is about caring enough to meet each student where they are. You already do that naturally." He smiled at her in the soft lantern light. "I have watched you preparing these past 2 weeks, the care you take, the thought you put into every detail. That dedication means more than perfect lesson plans. How did you become so wise? Years of making mistakes and learning from them. He straightened, preparing to leave. Get some rest if you can. I will have the wagon ready at dawn. Ethan. She stopped him before he could leave. Thank you for everything. The room, the help with the school, the endless patience and kindness. I do not know how I will ever repay you. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read in the shifting lantern light. You already have. This house has been too quiet for too long, just me and Mrs. Henley rattling around. Having you here, hearing your laughter, watching you bring life and purpose to this place, that is payment enough. After he left, Lenora sipped the warm milk and felt something shift inside her chest. She was falling in love with Ethan Anderson, this cowboy who had given her everything she had ever dreamed of without asking for anything in return. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. What if he did not feel the same way? What if his kindness was simply his nature and had nothing to do with any special feeling for her? And even if he did care for her, was she ready to open her heart again so soon after losing her mother? The first day of school arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. 28 children showed up that Monday morning, ranging from 5-year-old Emma Sullivan with her blonde braids and missing front teeth to 15-year-old Thomas Harper, who was already as tall as most men and clearly embarrassed to be in a classroom. Lenora greeted each student at the door, learning names and trying to match faces to the families she had visited. The day passed in a blur of activity. She started with basic assessments to understand each child's level, then moved into introductory lessons designed to establish expectations and build community. The youngest children needed nearly constant attention, the middle students required clear structure, and the older students needed engaging material to hold their interest. By 3 o'clock, when she rang the bell to dismiss class, Lenora was exhausted but exhilarated. Ethan was waiting outside with the wagon as promised. His face lit up when he saw her. How did it go? It was wonderful and terrifying and exhausting. I loved every minute. She climbed up beside him, her mind still buzzing with images of the day. Little Emma's excitement at learning to write her name, Thomas's grudging interest in a history lesson about the territorial expansion, the way the middle students had engaged in a spirited debate about whether animals could think and feel. I knew you would be perfect for this. As autumn deepened into winter, Lenora's life in Fort Bridger settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly like home. School occupied her weekdays, demanding all her creativity and energy, but also filling her with profound satisfaction. The children were responding to her teaching, their skills improving week by week. Parents reported that their children were excited about learning, that they came home talking about school and eager to complete their assignments. Her evenings at the ranch were equally fulfilling in different ways. She and Ethan had fallen into an easy companionship that felt as natural as breathing. They shared meals with Mrs. Henley, helped each other with various tasks, and spent long evenings talking about everything and nothing. Lenora helped Ethan with his ranch accounts, her experience managing the boarding house proving useful. Ethan helped her create visual aids for teaching, his practical skills producing maps and charts and teaching tools. December brought the first serious snow, transforming the landscape into a white wilderness. The drive to and from town became more challenging, but Ethan never complained. He bundled her in blankets and drove the wagon carefully, sometimes taking twice as long to navigate the snow-packed road safely. The schoolhouse grew bitterly cold despite the stove, so Lenora kept the children active with physical games that incorporated learning. Spelling relays, mathematical Simon says, historical reenactments. One particularly harsh December afternoon, a blizzard rolled in while school was in session. Within an hour, visibility dropped to nearly nothing as wind drove the snow horizontal. Lenora knew immediately they would not be leaving town that day. Ethan arrived as the storm worsened, snow caking his coat and hat. "Road is already impassable. We will need to stay in town tonight." I secured rooms at the boarding house. Mrs. Sutton welcomed them into the warm boarding house and showed them to separate rooms upstairs. Supper that evening was a communal affair, with several other travelers and townspeople stranded by the storm gathered around the long table. The conversation flowed easily, neighbors and strangers sharing stories and laughter while the wind howled outside. Later, unable to sleep with the storm raging, Lenora ventured downstairs wrapped in her shawl. She found Ethan in the parlor, standing by the window and watching the blizzard. He turned when she entered, a soft smile crossing his face. "Could not sleep either. The wind is too loud." She joined him at the window. Outside, the world had disappeared into swirling white chaos. "Do you think the cattle are all right?" "The boys will have driven them to the sheltered valley. They know what to do." But his expression showed concern. Storms like this could devastate a herd, could mean financial ruin for a rancher. "I am sorry. This must be worrying for you. It is part of the life. You learn to accept what you cannot control." He continued, gazing out the window. "Weather, markets, rustlers, disease, so many things that can destroy what you have built. But you keep going because what else can you do? You could give up, move somewhere easier." "I could. But then I would not be living the life my father envisioned, would not be honoring what he built." Ethan turned to face her fully. "That matters to me more than comfort or security. Keeping faith with those who came before, building something that will outlast me." In that moment, Lenora understood him completely. They were the same in this way, both driven by devotion to parents now gone, both trying to create something meaningful from the ashes of loss. "Your father would be very proud of you," she said softly. "Your mother too. You came west alone, built a life from nothing, and are now shaping the futures of nearly 30 children. That is legacy, Lenora. That is what matters." They stood together in the quiet parlor, the storm raging outside, and Lenora felt the space between them charging with unspoken feeling. She knew Ethan felt it too from the way his breathing had changed, the way his eyes held hers with new intensity. If she leaned forward slightly, if she closed the distance, she knew he would kiss her. Part of her desperately wanted that, but another part held back, uncertain and afraid. The moment stretched and then broke as Mrs. Sutton bustled in to tend the fire. "Still up, you two? That storm is not letting up any time soon. Best get what rest you can." The next morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape of pristine white drifts and crystalline beauty. The road would need clearing before they could return to the ranch. So Ethan joined a crew of men working to shovel the main street while Lenora helped at the boarding house, preparing meals for the stranded travelers. By evening, the road was passable, and they made the journey home in the wagon, the horses stepping carefully through the snow. Mrs. Henley greeted them with relief and hot coffee, reporting that the ranch had weathered the storm well. Only 2 cattle lost, which was far better than expected. Christmas approached, and Fort Bridger prepared for celebration despite the harsh conditions. The church planned a special service and pageant, with Lenora's students performing songs and recitations. Families who could afford it were preparing special meals and small gifts. Even those struggling financially found ways to mark the holiday with whatever small luxuries they could manage. Mrs. Henley threw herself into Christmas preparations at the ranch. She baked cookies and pies, prepared a goose for roasting, and decorated the main room with pine boughs and holly. On Christmas Eve, she invited some of the ranch hands who had nowhere else to go to join them for supper. After the meal, as the ranch hands relaxed by the fire playing cards and sharing stories, Ethan asked Lenora to walk with him. They bundled in coats and stepped into the crisp winter night. The sky blazed with stars, and the snow reflected the moonlight until everything glowed with silver luminescence. "I have something for you," Ethan said, pulling a small package from his coat pocket. "I know we did not discuss exchanging gifts, but I wanted you to have this." Lenora unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal, her initials stamped on the cover in gold. "Ethan, this is too much." "It is exactly right. I have watched you make notes on scraps of paper, seen you planning lessons on whatever is handy. You deserve something proper for your thoughts and ideas." He hesitated, then added, "I also thought you might want to write about this year, about starting over and making a new life. Years from now, it will be something to remember." Touched beyond words, Lenora blinked back tears. "I did not get you anything nearly so thoughtful. I made you a scarf." She pulled her own small package from her pocket, suddenly embarrassed by its simplicity. But Ethan's face lit up as he unwrapped the dark blue scarf she had knitted during stolen evening hours. "You made this. For me." "It is not much, just a scarf. It is perfect." He wrapped it around his neck immediately, his eyes warm. "No one has made me anything since my mother died. This means more than you know." They stood together in the snow, their breath forming clouds in the cold air, and Lenora felt that same charged awareness from the night of the storm. This time, there was no one to interrupt. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his gloved hand. "I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right moment, but maybe there is no perfect time for this." His voice was rough with emotion. "I am falling in love with you, Lenora. I think I started falling that first day when you stood in the street looking lost and determined at the same time. Every day since then, I have fallen further. The way you pour yourself into teaching those children, the way you laugh at my terrible jokes, the way you have made this house feel like a home again instead of just a place I sleep. I know we have not known each other long, and maybe it is too soon to say this, but I cannot hold it in any longer." Lenora's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Ethan, you do not have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that having you here is not charity and never was. It is the best thing that has happened to me in 5 years. I love you too." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I have been trying not to because it seemed too fast, too much. I just lost my mother and came here with nothing, and you have given me everything. I did not want to confuse gratitude with love, but it is not gratitude, it is love. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see the best in people. I love how you talk about your parents and honor their memory. I love the life you are building here and the man you are." Ethan's smile was radiant. Then he kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she pressed closer. The kiss held all the longing and tenderness and promise neither had dared express before. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, their faces flushed despite the cold. "Marry me," Ethan said. "I know we should wait, should court properly, but I already know what I want. I want to wake up every morning and see you across the breakfast table. I want to build this life together, not separately under the same roof. I want everything with you." "Yes." Lenora laughed and cried simultaneously. "Yes, absolutely yes." They announced their engagement the next day, Christmas morning, and Mrs. Henley cried happy tears and declared she had known all along. The news spread through Fort Bridger quickly, and the community responded with warm approval. The schoolteacher and the rancher seemed like a natural pairing, two hardworking people who had found each other and built something real. They planned a spring wedding, wanting to give themselves time to court properly despite their engagement. Ethan drove Lenora to and from school each day as always, but now they held hands during the journey and spoke openly about their dreams for the future. They would live at the ranch, of course. Lenora would continue teaching as long as the town needed her. Eventually, they both hoped for children of their own, a family to fill the house Ethan's father had built. Winter gave way to spring with gradual gentleness. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that slowly greened as temperatures rose. Wildflowers dotted the landscape in sudden bursts of color. The cattle grew sleek on fresh grass, and new calves wobbled after their mothers in the pastures. Life renewed itself with ancient rhythms, and Lenora felt herself blooming alongside the season. The wedding took place on a perfect May morning in 1877, 8 months after Lenora first arrived in Fort Bridger. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony in the small church, which was packed with townspeople and ranch hands and Lenora's students, all dressed in their best clothes. Mrs. Henley cried throughout the entire service. Even Marshall Graves, normally stoic and unreadable, was seen dabbing at his eyes. Lenora wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, with lace borrowed from 3 different women and a veil that had belonged to Ethan's mother. She carried wildflowers gathered that morning from the ranch. Ethan wore a new suit ordered from St. Louis, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in such formal attire. But his eyes never left Lenora as she walked down the aisle, and the love in his face made her catch her breath. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Matthews began, and Lenora felt time slow and expand around her. This moment, this church, this man taking her hand. All of it felt both surreal and absolutely right, as if her entire life had been leading to this point. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the church. "I promise to love you and honor you all my days, to stand beside you in times of joy and sorrow, abundance and want, to build our life together on honesty and respect, to cherish you as the gift you are." Lenora's voice was steady despite her tears. "I promise to love you and honor you as long as I live, to share my dreams and help you achieve yours, to make our house a home filled with laughter and love, to stand by you through all that comes, knowing that together we can weather any storm." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation sighed audibly. Then the church erupted in applause and cheers as the new Mr. and Mrs. Anderson walked back down the aisle together, their hands clasped and their faces shining. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up outside to accommodate the crowd. People brought food and drink, and someone produced a fiddle for dancing. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Lenora found herself whirled from partner to partner in various dances, breathless and laughing. But her eyes always sought Ethan, and each time their gazes met across the crowd, she felt that same surge of joy and rightness. As the sun set and guests began to leave, offering final congratulations and well wishes, Lenora and Ethan finally found themselves alone on their porch, watching the last visitors ride away into the gathering darkness. Mrs. Henley had tactfully retreated to her cottage, giving the newlyweds their privacy. "So this is real," Lenora said softly. "We are truly married. We are." Ethan pulled her close and she rested her head against his shoulder. "How does it feel, like coming home?" Like everything before was just the journey to reach this moment. She tilted her face up to look at him. "I arrived here with nothing but a letter and so much fear. You gave me everything I ever dreamed of and things I did not even know I wanted. A home, a purpose, a community. Love. You gave me just as much. This ranch was just a business before you came, a job I did to honor my father's memory. You turned it back into a home, made me realize I was just existing, not truly living. You taught me to hope again, to imagine a future beyond daily survival. He kissed her forehead gently. We saved each other, I think. Their first year of marriage was one of adjustment and deep happiness. Lenora continued teaching while also taking on more responsibilities at the ranch. She learned to manage the household accounts, to oversee the kitchen garden, to work alongside Mrs. Henley in preserving food for winter. Ethan taught her to ride, and soon she could sit a horse with competence, if not his easy grace. On Sundays, they would ride together through their land, and he would point out improvements he wanted to make, dreams he wanted to pursue. The school year ended in late spring, and Lenora had the summer to focus on the ranch and her marriage. Without the daily structure of teaching, she discovered the rhythms of ranch life more fully. She learned to recognize when a cow was about to calve, how to doctor sick animals with home remedies, the patterns of weather that meant rain or drought. The work was endless and often exhausting, but it was also deeply satisfying in ways her city life had never been. In August, Lenora realized her courses had stopped. She waited another month before saying anything to Ethan, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely. But when September arrived and her body began to change in unmistakable ways, she knew. She told him on a cool evening as they sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I am with child." Ethan went very still. Then he turned to her with an expression of wonder that made her heart melt. "Truly, truly. The baby should arrive in late March or early April." He gathered her into his arms, holding her with careful tenderness as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A baby, our baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "I cannot believe it. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with tears. "You have given me everything, Lenora, everything I thought I had lost when my parents died. A family, a future. Love so deep it terrifies me sometimes because I could not survive losing it. You will not lose us. We are here, and we are staying." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "This child will grow up knowing both parents, will grow up surrounded by love and security. We'll have everything we can give." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through fall and into winter. Lenora taught through the autumn term, her students fascinated by the changes in their teacher's body. She used it as a teaching opportunity, explaining human development in age-appropriate ways that had some parents clutching their pearls, but most nodding in approval. When the cold became too bitter for safe travel in her condition, Ethan insisted she take a leave from teaching until after the baby arrived. The town council agreed, securing a temporary replacement. Those winter months at the ranch were both challenging and precious. Lenora grew increasingly uncomfortable as the baby developed, her body swelling and aching in new ways. Mrs. Henley doted on her, preparing special foods meant to strengthen mother and child. Ethan became almost comically protective, refusing to let her lift anything heavy or climb stairs without assistance. She alternated between finding it endearing and being thoroughly annoyed. March arrived with muddy roads and the first hints of spring. Lenora felt enormous and impatient, ready for the pregnancy to end. Dr. Porter checked on her regularly, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy. But he warned that first babies often arrived late and they should prepare for a wait. The baby had other ideas. On a mild evening in late March, Lenora's water broke during supper. Ethan immediately sent one of the ranch hands racing for Dr. Porter while Mrs. Henley helped Lenora upstairs. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Dr. Porter stayed throughout, monitoring both mother and baby, offering encouragement and medical expertise. Ethan paced downstairs, unable to help but unable to leave. He could hear Lenora's cries of pain through the ceiling and felt each one like a knife to his heart. Mrs. Henley came down periodically to update him, her face lined with concern but not alarm. "It is hard work, but she is strong. All is progressing as it should." Finally, as afternoon light slanted through the windows, a new cry joined Lenora's, high and indignant and unmistakably alive. Ethan froze, hardly daring to breathe. Mrs. Henley appeared at the top of the stairs, her face wreathed in smiles despite obvious exhaustion. "You have a son, Ethan, a fine, healthy boy, and Lenora is well, just tired." He took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the bedroom to find Dr. Porter washing his hands in a basin while Mrs. Henley fussed with blankets. And there, propped up in bed looking exhausted but radiant, was Lenora holding a tiny bundle wrapped in white cloth. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Ethan approached slowly, almost afraid. The baby was so small, with a wrinkled red face and wisps of dark hair. Lenora folded back the blanket to reveal tiny fingers that waved aimlessly, impossibly delicate features, eyes squeezed shut against the world. Ethan felt his heart crack open with love so fierce it was almost painful. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered. "You are both perfect. Would you like to hold him?" With trembling hands, Ethan accepted his son, cradling the warm weight against his chest. The baby made small mewing sounds and then settled as if recognizing his father's heartbeat. "Hello, little one. I am your father. I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. I promise you will grow up safe and happy, knowing you are wanted and cherished." Lenora watched with tears streaming down her face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definitive. Now, holding his son, Ethan knew exactly what felt right. "James, after my father, James Martin Anderson." "James," Lenora repeated, testing it. "Yes, that is perfect." The weeks following James's birth were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. The baby needed constant care, feeding every few hours regardless of day or night. Lenora was sore and tired but filled with fierce maternal love. Ethan helped whenever he could, walking James when he cried, changing nappies with clumsy care, simply holding his son and marveling at this tiny human they had created. Mrs. Henley was invaluable, taking over all the household work and offering wisdom gained from raising her own children years ago. She prepared nourishing meals for Lenora, did the washing, and managed the house so the new parents could focus on their son. As spring advanced into summer, James grew and changed daily. His features sharpened, his eyes opening to reveal blue like his father's. He began to smile and make cooing sounds that delighted everyone. Lenora regained her strength and began to consider returning to teaching. She missed her students and the satisfaction of her work, but she also could not imagine leaving James for entire days. "You could bring him with you," Ethan suggested. "He is still nursing anyway. Set up a cradle in the schoolhouse. The students would learn responsibility by helping with a baby." It was unconventional, but so was everything about Lenora's life in Fort Bridger. She decided to try it, and when school resumed in September, 4-month-old James came along. The arrangement worked better than she had dared hope. The older girls took turns watching James when he was content, and Lenora nursed him during lunch and breaks. The students were gentle and careful with the baby, treating his presence as a privilege and responsibility. Years flowed by with the steady rhythm of seasons and work and family life. James grew from baby to toddler to boy, sturdy and bright and full of questions. He started school under his mother's tutelage at age 5, already knowing his letters and numbers. Lenora continued teaching, her reputation growing as word spread about the quality of education in Fort Bridger. Families moved to the area specifically so their children could attend her school. The ranch prospered under Ethan's careful management. He expanded their holdings gradually, buying adjacent land when opportunities arose, increasing the herd, breeding better horses. He hired more permanent hands as the work expanded, building additional bunkhouse space to accommodate them. The ranch that his father had started became one of the most successful in the region. In 1881, when James was 4 years old, Lenora discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter arrived on a snowy December morning, a much faster labor than James had been. They named her Sarah Grace, after both grandmothers, and James was enchanted by his baby sister. Sarah proved to be a different sort of child than James, more adventurous and bold where her brother was thoughtful and careful. She walked early, talked early, and kept everyone constantly vigilant. By age 3, she could ride a pony with fearless confidence, and by 5, she was helping Ethan with ranch work in ways that made Lenora's heart stop with fear and pride. The family continued to grow. A second son, Daniel, arrived in 1884, followed by another daughter, Elizabeth, in 1887. The house that had once been too large for Ethan alone now rang with children's voices, laughter, and the organized chaos of family life. Mrs. Henley declared it was exactly what the place had always needed. As the children grew, Lenora gradually reduced her teaching schedule, turning more responsibility over to an assistant teacher the town hired. She wanted to be more present for her own children while they were young, knowing how quickly these years would pass. But she never fully stopped teaching, finding deep satisfaction in shaping young minds and helping children discover their potential. Ethan proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving with all 4 children. He taught James and Daniel ranch work, instilling in them the same respect for the land and animals that his own father had taught him. He never dismissed his daughter's interest in ranch work either, teaching Sarah and Elizabeth to ride and rope and understand cattle with the same seriousness he showed the boys. Lenora loved watching him with their children, seeing the gentleness and strength he brought to fatherhood. Their marriage deepened and matured over the years. They weathered challenges together, years of drought, cattle disease, market crashes, injuries, and the ordinary struggles of raising children. But they also shared countless moments of joy. Children's first words and steps, successful harvests, quiet evenings on the porch, and the deep comfort of sharing a bed with someone you loved completely. As the century drew toward its close, Fort Bridger grew and changed. The railroad came through in 1889, connecting the town more directly to the wider world. More families arrived, businesses expanded, and the rough frontier outpost gradually became a proper town. Lenora's school expanded into a larger building with 2 classrooms and 2 teachers. The church was rebuilt in stone, replacing the original wood structure. Streets were graded and proper boardwalks installed. Through all the changes, the Anderson Ranch remained a constant, a place of stability and tradition. Ethan had become a respected leader in the community, serving on the town council and helping mediate disputes between ranchers. Lenora's reputation as an educator spread beyond Fort Bridger, and she was occasionally consulted by other communities starting their own schools. In 1895, James turned 18 and graduated from his mother's school with honors. He had already decided to stay and work the ranch with his father, having never wanted anything else. The two men worked side by side now, Ethan gradually transferring knowledge and responsibility to his son. Watching them together, Lenora saw 3 generations of Anderson men, each building on what the one before had created. Sarah, at 14, announced her intention to become a doctor, having been fascinated by medicine since childhood. The declaration shocked some in town, but Ethan and Lenora supported their daughter's ambition. They began planning how to fund her education, knowing it would require sending her east to one of the few medical schools that accepted women. Daniel, at 11, loved books and history more than ranching, much to Ethan's amused acceptance. "Not every son has to follow his father's path," he told Lenora. "Let the boy find his own way." Elizabeth, at 8, was still young enough that her future remained unwritten, but she showed signs of combining her sister's boldness with her mother's love of teaching. One evening in late summer of 1896, Lenora and Ethan sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the sun set over the mountains. 20 years had passed since that September day when she arrived in Fort Bridger with nothing but a letter. 20 years of building a life together, of love and work and purpose. "You ever miss St. Louis?" Ethan asked. "The culture, the refinement, the easier life." Lenora considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss small things. Theater performances, libraries, being able to buy something without ordering it from a catalog, but miss the life itself. No, that was not my life, not really. I was always trying to keep my head above water, always one disaster away from losing everything. Here, I have everything that matters. You, our children, our home, meaningful work. I would not trade any of it for all the theater performances in the world. You have given me so much," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky I was that day I walked across the street to meet a teacher I thought we were not ready for. If I had waited even an hour longer, someone else might have found you first. There was no one else. There was only you." Lenora took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "You gave me everything I ever dreamed of, Ethan. But more than that, you gave me things I did not even know I could dream of. A love that has sustained me through everything. A family that fills my heart to overflowing. A home that is not just a building but a feeling of absolute belonging. We built that together. We did. And we will continue building it for whatever years we are given." She leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the sage-scented evening air. "This is what I want our children to remember. Not the struggles or hardships, though those shaped us too, but this feeling of safety and love and permanence. The knowledge that they come from people who loved each other fiercely and completely, who built something lasting and good." Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "They will remember. How could they not? We are showing them every day what love looks like, what commitment means. They are learning by watching us work together, support each other, face challenges as partners." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sounds of their children getting ready for bed, Daniel arguing with Sarah about something trivial, Elizabeth's laughter, James's deep voice telling them to settle down. The sounds of family, of life continuing its ancient patterns. 20 years, Lenora mused. It feels like both forever and no time at all. And we have many more years ahead of us. We are not even 40 yet. Think of everything still to come. Grandchildren, watching our children build their own lives, growing old together in this place we have built. I cannot wait to see it all." She tilted her face up for a kiss, which Ethan gave gladly, still sweet and tender after 20 years of marriage. The years continued their steady march. Sarah left for medical school in 1899, armed with her parents' blessings and financial support. She wrote home regularly, her letters full of the excitement and challenges of her studies. Daniel decided to pursue teaching, studying at the Territorial College, and then returning to Fort Bridger to take over when his mother finally retired from the classroom in 1901. Elizabeth surprised everyone by declaring her intention to become a rancher like her father. At 16, she could outride most of the ranch hands and had a natural gift for understanding cattle. Ethan began training her seriously in ranch management, delighted to have another child committed to continuing the family business. James married in 1902, choosing a local girl named Rebecca who had been in his mother's school years earlier. The young couple moved into their own house on the ranch property, staying close while building their independent lives. When their first child arrived in 1903, making Ethan and Lenora grandparents for the first time, the circle felt complete. Sarah returned from medical school in 1905, one of only a handful of female physicians in Wyoming. She set up practice in Fort Bridger, quickly proving her worth despite initial skepticism from some. Her parents were immensely proud, knowing the courage it had taken to pursue such an unconventional path. As 1910 approached, bringing a new decade and new century well underway, Ethan and Lenora found themselves in their early 50s, their children grown and building lives of their own, grandchildren beginning to arrive, their ranch thriving under the joint management of James and Elizabeth. They had lived to see the Wyoming Territory become a state in 1890, had witnessed the transformation of Fort Bridger from rough frontier outpost to established town, had contributed to that transformation through their work and dedication. One spring morning, Lenora stood in what had been the schoolhouse, now expanded and improved but still fundamentally the same building where she had taught her first class. Daniel was teaching now, carrying on her legacy with his own style and passion. She watched through the window as he led his students through a lesson, patient and engaged, and felt deep satisfaction. Proud of him. Ethan's voice came from behind her. He had walked over from the general store where he had been conducting business. Immensely. And grateful that he found his calling. She turned to face her husband, seeing silver in his hair now and lines around his eyes, but also seeing the same man who had offered her kindness when she was a stranger with nothing but a letter. Grateful for all of it, really. Our children have grown into such good people. They learned from you, from us. Ethan pulled her close. Every day I am thankful you got on that stagecoach 24 years ago. Thankful Martha wrote that letter, even though she did not live to see you arrive. Thankful for every twist of fate that brought you to Fort Bridger and into my life. No regrets, not a single one. You. Only that we cannot live it all again, but maybe that is what makes it precious. Knowing these moments are unique and fleeting, that we have to cherish them while we have them. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Take me home, Ethan. Let us spend the rest of this beautiful day doing nothing but being together. They walked hand in hand back to the ranch, the spring sun warm on their faces, the air full of sage and possibility. The house stood solid and welcoming, exactly as Ethan's father had envisioned it, filled now with the love and life he had dreamed of. Children and grandchildren would continue to fill it in years to come, carrying forward the legacy that began with a letter and a cowboy's kindness. That evening, as they had done thousands of times before, Lenora and Ethan sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land. The mountains stood eternal against the sky, the creek sang its constant song, the cattle grazed peacefully in the valley. Everything they had built together spread out before them, tangible and real and lasting. "You remember that first night we sat here?" Lenora asked. "When you told me the town would work everything out." "I do. You looked terrified but were trying so hard to be brave. I knew then you were someone special. You gave me everything that night without even knowing it. Hope when I had none. Faith that things could work out. A glimpse of the life we would build together, though I did not recognize it yet. We gave each other everything." Ethan pulled her closer. "That is what love is, I think. Not one person rescuing the other, but two people choosing to build something together that neither could create alone." Lenora thought about the truth of that statement. She had not been rescued by Ethan, despite how it might have appeared. She had been given an opportunity, yes, but she had seized it with both hands and worked to build the life she wanted. Together, they had created something far greater than either could have managed separately. A thriving ranch, a strong family, a legacy of service to their community, and a love that had weathered every test and emerged stronger. "I love you," she said simply. "After all these years, those words still feel inadequate to express what I feel. I know. I love you too. Always have, always will." They sat together as stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a life of meaning and purpose. The letter that brought Lenora to Fort Bridger had promised a teaching position and nothing more. But the cowboy who met her that September day had given her something infinitely more valuable. A true home, a love for the ages, and the fulfillment of every dream she had never dared to dream. In the years that followed, as they aged gracefully together and watched their grandchildren grow, that evening remained emblematic of everything their marriage represented: partnership, devotion, gratitude, and the profound satisfaction of building something lasting and good. When people asked them the secret to a happy marriage, Ethan and Lenora always gave the same answer: choose each other every day, work toward common goals, and never forget what brought you together in the first place. Their story became part of Fort Bridger's history, told to new arrivals as an example of how the West built its communities. The school teacher who came with nothing but a letter, and the cowboy who gave her everything she ever dreamed of, and how together they created a legacy that would endure for generations. As the decades passed, and the 20th century unfolded with all its changes and challenges, the Anderson Ranch continued to thrive under family stewardship. The values Ethan and Lenora instilled in their children were passed down to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Hard work, education, community service, and above all, love. Love for the land, love for each other, love for the life they had been given and the one they chose to create. And through it all, until the end of their days, Ethan and Lenora remained devoted partners, still holding hands as they walked through their land, still sitting together on their porch watching sunsets, still grateful for that September day in 1876, when fate brought them together and love made them whole. The story of their love became timeless, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from unexpected places, that generosity and kindness create ripples that extend far beyond the initial gesture, and that true love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day and choosing each other again and again. From nothing but a letter came everything that mattered: home, purpose, family, and a love that transformed two lives and blessed countless others through the legacy it created.